Welcome to Breakthrough the Ordinary podcast. Are you ready to be committed to your future self? If you are, sibling duo Mark and Claudine Tremonti will take you on a journey of self-discovery to unlock your highest potential. Through impactful conversations with thought leaders, healers, coaches, and entrepreneurs, we will share practical tools and strategies to generate the life you envision. New episodes drop every Monday.
And we have the wonderful Bria Lyn with us, who is an expert in trauma healing through reprogramming the brain to an unconditional state of allowing for the complete healing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. This allows for healthy habits and boundaries to come natural, thus creating healthy relational dynamics along with financial and physical wellness. You can follow her on Facebook. She's amazing, and she has amazing packages, especially. She has 4 sessions for $350, which is unbelievable and well worth it. We've all delved into it and love her.
Yes, I agree. We're both yeses to
Yes.
you. So being that our theme is, right, this breakthrough, what is it that may be limiting people? Our first question always really is about what do you see as the individual's breakthrough that they get to have for themselves so they can have the life they say they want?
Of course. Yeah. And thank you for having me, you guys. I really appreciate this. This is awesome. And so as far as the breakthrough is concerned, the thing that I notice about all my clients is that they tend to have, better relationships. They tend to break through these financial dynamics, these habits that they have. Oftentimes we don't realize that we're going through cycle after cycle after cycle, right? And these cycles repeat. We have no idea. And we go, why is this cycle happening? Why does this keep happening to me? And the whole objective of this subconscious reprogramming is to pinpoint exactly where it starts and then to break through that in the mind and the consciousness to the point where we're not self-sabotaging ourselves anymore. Because oftentimes we have no clue that we're doing those things. It's just an automatic repeat cycle, right? So ultimately what you're going to see is you're going to see better financial stability. You're going to see better business decisions. You're probably going to see more clients. I get a lot of people, I don't get the clients that I want. I don't get enough clients in my life. And we figure out what that is and why that's happening. And you get better relationship dynamics ultimately.
I just want to share something. If anybody watches this, they're going to see you and go, she's so young. Because that was like the first thing. It was like, you're so wise. And she's amazing, even though she looks like she's 20. Anyway, I just wanted to say that because people go, I had that same reaction. So explain to us, what is subconscious programming, or our listeners, so they understand.
Of course, yeah. And by the way, I'm in my 30s. So
yeah, I know.
Thank you.
I know, but you look 20 and it's like, all this wisdom? Yeah, does she really know? Yeah, she does.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And by the way, subconscious reprogramming will keep you young. Putting that in there. It really will. I'm not joking. So just to explain subconscious reprogramming, I have a scientific way of explaining it and I have a spiritual way. I can dive into both of those things. I love both of them. I started with the scientific. I started with a very logical mind. And believe it or not, as I reprogrammed my brain, it opened up my brain, which is what's going to happen to you when you reprogram. Your mind just opens up, okay? And so as I reprogrammed my brain, I started to actually see the spiritual side and understand the spiritual side a bit more, which I think in a lot of, these subconscious reprogramming sessions that people do, we miss that spiritual side. So I'm just going to explain it from the scientific aspect first, which is, as a lot of people know it, is, as you're growing up, you are noticing, you're learning, you're becoming a sponge, right? You start at a theta wavelength in the brain. That's how you operate. That's how your brain operates. And so you start out as this big sponge from about 0 to 7. And I say 0, I'm going to say from birth, because these things, I notice they happen in the womb. I get people all the time where they have memories, conscious memories of things that happened in the womb, right? So these things that you're taking on, that you're noticing, these behaviors, they go deep into the subconscious mind. And we have a conscious mind, we have a subconscious mind. So we have that subconscious and all these things get stored in there. 95% of all your information is stored in there, right? And you got this thing called an RAS. The RAS, reticular activating system, you can go look it up. But what happens is you got your conscious brain. Your conscious brain sees everything around you and your subconscious says, hey, this is what I want you to look for. Then it connects to the RAS, the reticulating, I can't even talk today, the RAS. And so it connects with the RAS. And then what it does is say, hey, go look for that. Go find that thing because this is what's familiar to you. This is what you know. This is what is safe, right? Your subconscious mind is there to keep you safe. However, we'll find out later that it doesn't really do that. It doesn't always do that. Sometimes it does that. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on how you grew up, what you've learned, the traumas that you've had. So your RAS based on not only what you've learned as a child, but the trauma you've endured growing up. So this can also happen when you're an adult. There, something like an armed robbery, something like rape, molestation, something of that sort. All of a sudden, your subconscious mind is looking for things saying, hey, that's danger right there. And then it sees it, it identifies it, right? And that becomes the reality that you know. So that's what your subconscious is responsible for. Now, as we reprogram the brain, a lot of people, when they say reprogramming the brain, they're going to tell you something like, oh, we're going to reprogram the brain to get you what you want, right? Here's my issue with that. How the heck do you know what you want when your brain is programmed for trauma? You're not going to know. Most of my clients come to me and they say, I want this business with this much money. I want this relationship. I want this thing. I'm like, you don't know what you want because your brain is like a big bundle of trauma right now. You have no clue. So what happened and what I learned over time is that we need to decondition the brain. So what I call subconscious reprogramming is really the deconditioning, right? It's coming to an unconditional state, which is love. We on a soul level operate at the state of love. We on a flesh level operate at the state of willing things into our existence, of force, of confusion, of frustration, all these things. And, it depends on what you believe. The spiritual side of this, I'm going to tell you, is that I believe that God is love, right? God is unconditional. That's what I believe. You can believe whatever you want. But I feel like our soul is aligned with God, is aligned with what God wants for us. So when we decondition the mind, instead of trying to force things into our reality, instead of trying to make things work, we wind up just willing things into our existence that are actually for us. We become a magnet for what is for us. So that's how the way that I do subconscious reprogramming works and operates.
So I heard you say, we get back to that moment so we know what the person really wanted without all the conditioning. I work with you. I know one of the mechanisms you use is tapping. To be honest, I never did it before until I met you. I've heard of it. So maybe you can explain how that is a part of the deprogramming.
Absolutely. So what I use in my technique, and I kind of vary depending on client to client, because I'll give you guys some secrets today about how to identify subconscious blocks and reprogram them yourselves. Like, you don't need to hire me. You don't need me. And I'm not saying that to demarket myself, but I just want to tell you that all the power is within you. You can do this on your own. I promise you. But what I use, and the reason that clients come to me, is sometimes finding those subconscious blocks on your own can be difficult. That's just the reality. So the technique that I use, it's similar to an EFT. It is not EFT by any means. And the reason that I do it, it's like I said, I had a very scientific mind coming into this, right? So what I like to do is I like to calm the left side of the brain down when I'm working with a client, because the left side of the brain is going to be your logical mind, right? Your right side of your brain is your creative mind. And when you're in a state of trauma, you are trying to figure things out. You're trying to be logical about them, too logical. So we got to calm that down, right? And so what I do is I instate a type of tapping on one side of the body, which is the right side, which then, works with the left side of the brain as well as the subconscious. And it calms that down. So as you're tapping on acupoints, what happens is the nervous system completely calms down. And what happens when you're calm is that you're in an unconditional state, that state of love, right? So what happens is you block out, in order to identify the subconscious block, you need to see where it started. You need to know where it began. And in order to do that, in order to see that, we got to calm your brain down. We got to calm your nervous system down in order for you to identify where that came from. Now, if you're like a big ball of, I don't want to see it, this happened to me, and and you have things blocked out. It's common with PTSD, CPTSD. You block things out. It's because your brain is too scared to see it. But if you calm your brain down enough and then you see it, then the next thing you can see is, here are the cycles, the habits that I started creating afterwards that then put me in self-sabotage mode, right? So the technique that I use is simply just to calm the nervous system down. You can use many techniques to do that. It's not going to be just, tapping.
Thank you.
Wow, now it makes more sense what's happening. Because we've both worked with you and think you're awesome. And it just, now we understand the physics. Wow, that is interesting. You speak about alignment. You spoke some of it, but what keeps us out of alignment and how to bring us back in, or what that looks like?
I would love to bring the spiritual side of this in, if that's okay. because we talked a little bit about the unconditional state, right? The unconditional state is love. I talk about being in alignment with your soul, right? Which is being unconditional. So as you guys know, I came from the new age and I took myself out of that. I'm sure you guys know from following me on Facebook, you're like, hey, what happened to that girl? So I'll explain that because it was actually subconscious reprogramming that brought me to that understanding. So as we try to force things into our reality, what we're doing is we are trying to figure it out on our own. Instead of aligning with our soul, we're trying to figure things out on our own. We're trying to do things on our own. Now, I get clients all the time. I'm burnt out. I'm tired. I can't figure things out. And I'm like, it's because you're trying to will something into your existence instead of letting it be what it is. And so that can be really hard because, that doesn't mean that you don't do any work. That means that you let the ideas pour through you, let the inspiration pour through. Your soul is inspired. And that inspiration and that instinct that you get, I do believe comes from God. I do believe that unconditional state comes from yourself. It comes from within. It comes from God. I really do believe that. So what happens is we exert energy and we burn ourselves out, right? Now, I did a lot of research on this because, I love to do research. It's just, I'm a nerd. I get into this. And I did some research and it was funny because I got taken back to, there was this video and I'm not going to name drop or anything like that because I don't like doing that. But there was this video a long time ago that when I started getting into all this spiritual stuff, I love to watch it. And it was weird because the other day I seen it and it clicked and I go, whoa. And it goes, manifestation, right? Manifestation is the Lucifer effect. I went deep into it. I was like the Lucifer effect. And then my brain goes back to, like, we all know this story, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Buddhist, whether you're this, whether you're that, the story of Adam and Eve. The serpent comes to Eve and she goes, hey, eat this apple, right? Or whatever it is. We're going to call it an apple. We're just going to play with that, right? So we'll call it an apple. Hey, eat this fruit of knowledge. You'll know the good and evil. You'll be just like God. You can create your own reality. And I'm thinking back and I'm going, man, that sounds really familiar. Like somebody has told me this before. Oh, wait. It was when I got into manifestation. So what happens is we get into this whole thing of trying to will things, thinking that there's a constant cycle of healing. That's a lie, by the way. That is such a lie. Like, you will always be learning things. But I promise you, you can get to a state of such discernment and such alignment that there's not going to be this constant need for healing. You're not going to constantly need crystals. You're not going to constantly need this. You're not going to, I'm sorry, but that's all money ran stuff. Like, people go, oh, why do you charge so little? It's because, I don't believe that, people need to come to me and pay me gobs of money because I'm, somebody who can heal all. Like, I just don't believe that. Right. I do believe that reality, that place of healing, we get stuck in that place of healing. I gotta heal. We exert so much energy, and money is what? Money is energy. So we drain our money, we drain our energy, we drain everything, and then we wind up tired and confused. Your soul's unconditional. There ain't no confusion in your soul, period. End of story. So that would be alignment to me. I know that was long-winded, but I just wanted to kind of take you there.
No, but for me, alignment is the thing. What you're speaking of, that the soul knows, the God, whatever you want to call it, spirit in us knows. And all we really need to do is align and act. I'm so on that because I realize I've played all these, like, I got to heal forever. I've spent money. I've put myself in a hole, and I hear it a lot. And there is this part that I can get caught up in, that part of it, and not just, can I just align? It might not look like anything I know, but it's right here. It's right here. So to hear you talk about it and put your spin on it, and I love it. But
I could go deeper into that too. I can explain how you can identify too when you're getting in that hole. You know what I mean? Like the hole of willing. I think that might be easier.
I think people would. I'd love it. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, we come to a point, one thing that I learned, okay, is we look at pride, right? There's pride and there's humility. Your soul is humble. Your soul is in that state of your soul, it has to be humble, because if it's not humble, it can't see when it's doing something that doesn't work for it, right? But when we're in a prideful state, well, then we have our blinders on. We can't see. We know everything. We are the best. We're going to justify. And the reason you're going to know that you're in a pride state because you're justifying, you're making excuses. It's confusing. It's frustrating. You're going to know you're in a humble state because your nervous system's calmed down and you go, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And then you're going to forgive yourself and you're going to come up with these new ways, these new habits, these new ways to align. And that's the actual alignment of the soul, is humility. It's total humility. Pride is the ego. 100%.
Things you had said is, right, when you're in that calm state, I'll use humility, right? That's when we allow the inspiration. That's when we're not willing it. We're in that. And one of the discussions that Mark and I have had and some others is that balance. I'm not a big word. It's not one of my favorite. I'll use harmony. I prefer harmony. Is where do we allow the inspiration and what amount is some committed or inspired action? I'm hearing you speak into it a little. I don't know if you can go a little deeper, right? Because I'm hearing you say, well, if you want to be right about it, or you think you're prideful and I got this, sounds like then there's not committed action. It's willed action. So I don't know if you could speak into this harmony that we can create, tap into.
So let me just speak into the pride a little bit, because I think we need to identify when pride is occurring a little bit more. I don't think I went into enough detail there. And then I'll explain how I feel inspired action. Everybody's convictions are going to be different. And I would really like to inspire people to just look inside themselves and figure things out on their own, which is the most important. So we're not in that cycle of willing things, and we're not in that cycle of getting addicted to healing, right? Because that's a big thing. That's a big reason we get drained. So when it comes to pride, one thing that I know, because I always speak to God. I don't know what you guys speak to, but I speak to God and I always ask him, because I humble myself and I go, okay, I did something. I'm like, Lord, help me out, because I don't know. But he told me one day, I was like, how do I get out of this pride state? And he said, notice your tongue. Now, there's a line in scripture and it says you can either curse somebody with your tongue or you can bless somebody with your tongue. Your tongue is the most powerful thing out there, right? There's a difference between judgment and discerning, okay? Big difference. And so he said, I want you to watch your tongue. And when you feel, because you'll feel it inside your body, you feel this urge, right? And you're like, oh, I want to prove my point. I want to tell them who I am. And everybody gets it. Nobody's ever going to be I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm like, somebody great. But you get to this point, you can feel it in your body. You're like, oh, I'm going to tell them who I am, right? And I am this good person. But the thing is, the second you're trying to prove that you're a good person, you just established some pride. You just projected some pride. And what happens with pride, we have this thing, in the New Age, we called it projection, right? So once you establish pride, it's a dominance. Then the other person establishes dominance. What you got? You got to fight. It's different. And this is why with subconscious reprogramming too, the communication becomes different, because you learn to feel the feelings. You learn to feel into it. You learn to stop yourself. You learn to bite your tongue. So one thing that's really important is to identify that feeling and then learn to step back, learn to take a moment and go and journal, right? And this is where we come into the harmony part. I love when those fleshly moments happen, because as you guys know, I make posts on Facebook and people go, oh, your wisdom. I'm like, yeah, that comes from up there. That comes from in here. That ain't from me. I don't that's some spiritual stuff, because that ain't from me. I'm sorry. And I will not take credit for any of it. But what happens is, and this is how God revealed it to me, is that when we take that step back and we see our fleshly moments, and instead of speaking back to that person, we try to understand, right? Because love is understanding. Love is patient. Love is kind. It doesn't need to be rushed. It doesn't need to be fixed now. That's pride. Pride needs to fix it now. Pride needs to do it now. But harmony is when you take that step back. You're patient. Maybe you journal. Maybe you pray. Maybe however you do it. Sometimes I sing. I will make lyrics up and people will hear me singing in the room. I'm like, I'm sorry guys, but I got to sing this out. Good luck. Sorry if I hurt your earbuds, but you do what you do, you dance, you do whatever you got to do to let it out. And eventually, if you don't let pride get to you, the wisdom pours out. There is actual wisdom inside your soul. and it will guide you. And that's what shows you the path. That's what shows you the next step. That's what takes you to a place of not just going back to that person, because when you're in a state of pride, guess what you're going to do? When you argue, you're going to separate from that person. You create separation, you create division. But when you go back to understand, now you got two choices. Do I go back and I have a conversation with that person, I make that right? Or do I establish a boundary, a healthy boundary? And do I need to remove myself, for my protection? So now you got wisdom. You're in harmony with your soul.
So I heard you say it starts with asking God, your higher spirit, your soul essence, however that is, so that you can then receive. And I'm also hearing that there's an embodiment. There's a sensation and a knowing that occurs. And when we could stop and pause, then we have some choice and discernment here to see where we want to go. So I really appreciate that. I heard what you said, and it's polarizing to say, right, the market of New Ageism kind of has you always buying a new product, a new crystal, a pendulum, this service and breath. And they're all wonderful modalities, right? In themselves, they're wonderful. But I'm hearing you say on some level, they never give you a sign of arriving back to self, as if it's out there through this mechanism versus this vessel.
I'm not going to say that it won't do great things for you. I believe those are all tools. I've done the breath work. I've done, I was a yoga instructor. I was all the things. I was into crystal healing. I was all in that, right? But I will say this. I find that when you don't speak to your soul first, when you don't go to you first, when you trust something outside of yourself, it's a little bit harder for you to seek that wisdom, right? For you to see that. You kind of get into this distraction mode. And when you're outside of yourself, you're constantly distracted. That's why you can't figure out the path. That's why you can't see the path, because you're distracted. But you got to go in here. And so many of us are uncomfortable. We're like, we don't want to look in there. We don't want to see this. Because you know what you see when you go in here? You see your parents. I'm going to be real with you. You see your parents. You see your grandparents. You see, and the thing is, if you admit for a single second that what I'm doing is icky, well, guess where I learned that from? And guess what I got to look at now? So I don't want to look at that. So it's really hard for us. The New Age teaches us to distract. Whereas when you're actually working from the soul, you're not distracted. You're in here. It's a lot of quiet time. It's a lot of time to yourself. It's a lot of discernment. It's different.
Thank you.
It's that slowing down. I mean, I don't live a crazy life. I can't imagine living even bigger than I'm because even in my life, I see the distraction, or I see just living keep certain things at bay. And I'm not saying bad, judging. I'm just looking at, because what I'm hearing you say is there's sensations in the body. Can you slow enough to feel the sensations? Because when you were speaking before about, when you want to speak to somebody, I feel that in my body. I can't imagine I'm the only one that feels when things are happening or going, especially in those tight moments, to be slow enough to just feel it in the constant. Because when you're speaking about harmony, it's like I can slow enough to just listen and feel sensations. The inspired, it's there. It's always there. It's waiting for us. It's so patient that it'll wait forever. It'll go, I love you enough. I'll wait forever. And whenever you're ready. And it's constantly speaking to me as just keep slowing, because that's what I want. We have words. My sister is really great at inspiring a word for the year. And for me, it's really alignment. There's acceptability and accountability in that acceptance, but a lot in that place of alignment, like you said, just slow, listen, let this be. Why am I trying to look at anything else? Not that anything is bad and you can have it all, but why am I not coming from here? I'm just trying to build something that's going to hide this or not give me fulfillment, love, connection with love and spirit and the God. All of that. That's what I really want. Why am I doing everything else? I just want to say that energy drain, because I am putting so much in there. You might not even feel it on a strong level. It's just that subtlety but thank you. It's always inspiring.
It's so funny that you say that too, because I know you guys know this. I'm not really out there promoting it, but I'm writing a book right now. And last night, so I'm halfway through the book, and I was writing about what I call the obsession spell. So ultimately what I talk about in my book, it's called Under the Influence, and it's all about being under the influence of, you got the devil and you got the angel, and, what are they saying, right? And so it talks about how many years of my life I was in that willing state that like I have to do everything on my own. And I was looking at what imprints the brain, right? What really imprints the brain? What does the average relationship look like? And it's funny that you talk about patience, because something that came to me was that we have this thing in media where we think we know love. Most of us think we do. We really do. But what do we see on the TV? What do we see in advertisements? We see romance. We see candlelit dinners, and we see like sex, and we see all these things, and we're like, oh, that is love. I want that. And then we get into these relationships, we give into all these things, and then it dies off. And we go, why is it that we keep different person, same like spirit, right? I call them familiar spirits. I say it's a cycle. It's a cycle. You keep picking the same person over until you break that cycle, right? So it's funny because in the media, we romanticize love. And let me tell you something, love is not romantic. Not in the slightest bit. Love is accepting the person in front of you. It is having patience with that person. It's having understanding. It is completely unconditional. There is no condition in love. So if you're in a relationship and all of a sudden you're like wearing clothes you think is going to make you sexy because that man is gonna see you and he's gonna come to you, you're willing something. I call that witchcraft. I'm like, that is witchcraft. That is lust witchcraft. Sorry. That is not love. You are trying to will something. You don't even know if that man is good for you. You're basing it off his looks. You're basing it off his, maybe his business, maybe his money. You have a checklist going on. That's lust. That is lust. And so we get taught we got to have a checklist. He's got to have his money together. He's got to, he's got to have them abs. Oh, he better be doing yoga every day. Oh, I hope he's weightlifting, right? We base it off of that. That ain't love. And so I noticed subconsciously, right, as a whole, we get programmed to believe that love is romance. Now, it's funny because somebody posted something the other day and they said, what was it? It was like something like, oh, well, think about the woman, guys, they just go out and they have friends with benefits, but think about the woman who like that guy just wanted me for sex. And at first I'm like, okay, yeah. But then I think about it. And, mind you, I went celibate. I decided to go celibate because I was like, I want to know if a man really loves me. That's like for real. I want to know if he's in for that commitment because that's my goal. I align to that goal. I align to that goal by creating circumstances that it's like, if you want commitment to me, then you only get all of me if you get to that point. That is it, right? So that's alignment. That is like you create boundaries, you create standards, and you stick with them. That is actual alignment. And so I went celibate. And it's funny because what happened when I did that was the man that I was with said, you know what, I'm not interested in marriage. So guess what happened? A weight got lifted off of me. I did not waste my time with that man. Not that I don't love him, not that I don't care about. I think he's an amazing person, but I did not waste my time with that man because I got into alignment with my goal. And it wasn't about lust anymore. I stopped romanticizing love. So it's funny that you say that because in a subconscious level, we have all programmed our brains to think that way. And we're not patient enough to get to know that person before we hop into the bed with them. And you want to get deeper into that. It's funny. If you get deeper into that, it's an unworthiness. If I don't give him sex, he won't stay. Yep. I see it all the time.
This deep stuff. The bottom line is if you're not aligned, you're doing it above yourself. You're never really connected to yourself.
I'm sitting here in that space of going, what you said about what love is, what we've been shown. So our parents, our grandparents, our generational stuff. Then you have the social media and the movies and that portrait. And so this idea of this getting to know, this unconditionalness, this patience, unfolding, the attunement that we were speaking into. And I think what I've watched as a healer, as a therapist and coach is that space of giving it to self first and what that even looks like. Because it's like, oh, great idea. Great concept. I got to love me first. What is that? Because all I have is that comparison to, well, that's what love was that. And that was love on social media. And I think that's a really interesting place for people to start. It's like, what is love? Like that word unconditional, beautiful word, but what does that mean? I didn't have it because I have all these conditions. Social media has conditions and my family had conditions. How do you speak into that allowing and that creating or tapping into what is unconditionalness? What is that space?
I love the verse, and everybody knows this verse because it's spoken at the weddings. It's spoken everywhere. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast, love does not envy. You can go through that whole thing. I love the end too. The end is one of my favorite. Love always protects. So love has boundaries. Love has standards, right? Love protects itself. And so if love is patient and love is kind, then it has no pride, has no ego. There's none of that there, right? And my question when somebody is trying to be romantic with me, trying to be sensual with me, or trying to be my friend, do you really want to get to know me? Right? I listen. I pay attention. I'm like, are they only talking about themselves? Are they curious? Because love is curious. Love wants to get to know you. Love wants to know you on a level. Love wants to protect you, right? Love wants to provide for you. So it sounds like condition. It sounds like that. But on a soul level, it's really about getting to know the soul and this being the soul. So on, like, if you're looking at it at a two-way street, it's getting to know the soul and to be the soul in one. I know that's like kind of a crazy concept, but that's the way I see it. But yeah, it's patient. Love is that moment. I just thought about this. Love is that moment when you want to prove yourself. You want to prove how good of a person you are, or that your point is right. And love is the moment that you hold your tongue and remember who you are and say, I know who I am. I don't need to prove that to you. You are not God. I do not need to answer to you. It is knowing who you are and staying in that. It's an act of being.
It is interesting that, that's Paul to the Corinthians. I know that because I went to Corinth and saw it, where he sent it to the Corinthians where they lived and stuff. But it's interesting that everybody uses that, but we're not really living it. Like, we love the idea of it. And when you were saying to get to know the person, because most of the time we're projecting our image on them. We're projecting what we think they are, what we want them to be. But if you're not aligned, you're doing everything. It's never going to align. It's never going to be love if you're not going home to yourself. If you're not lining here and being with yourself, it's never going to align out there. That's really what you're saying on some deep levels. That soul, be that soul, love the soul. This is really deep.
And I'm sitting here, and I know we started this conversation about reprogramming. It's the thread, the needle, right? That we're really talking about, because I'm thinking of, wow, there's so many conditions and programming to undo. And I don't mean it from a heavy place. It just is. We all carry it. It's not like, oh, you got more, I got less. And seeing ourselves in that way, right? We're walking along the same path. I like Ram Dass, we're all walking each other home. In that way, and how to hold that space for each other. I'm sitting like, from a reprogramming place, is going back to that space where we left our soul to absorb. And how do we, like, it almost sounds like the reprogramming is going back to that space, that soul. It's like, yeah, this was just a movie you've been sitting through. But remember, you were this amazing blank screen of light, love, God, divinity, right from the core. Everything else has just been, what you've been watching. And that, we're very committed to our story. No, don't take it away from me. Who will I be without it? It's like, oh, you'll always be divinity. That's really scary for many people.
You bring a good point up. I remember you and I had this conversation in private one time about forgiveness, right? And I mentioned during that time, I said, I've learned something about myself, and through working with so many clients, is that we tend, because we're programmed a certain way, we tend to become in the likeness of the person that abused us. And that person that abused us didn't necessarily know that what they were doing was abuse. I mean, we look back, I call them generational curses. I call subconscious blocks, hands down, they are generational curses. I don't care what anybody says. They really are. And my whole goal, what was put in my heart, my inspiration for this work, was to break those curses. I see that everybody is love. I see their capacity. I know who they can be. And I just, like, for me, it is deep, like saying, it's not that big, that big of a deal. But I looked around when I started this, and I saw people, and they were running into walls. They were just running themselves thin. I mean, to the point where I have clients that are suicidal. they want to take their own lives because they don't even know who they are anymore. So for me, this is such a passion project. The book, everything, it's just such a passion project because I'm like, I want you to know who you are, but I want you to know it through you. And that's what I put it in their hands, right? So you and I were talking about this one day, and I was mentioning that let's say you have a parent, right? And your parent works all the time. They don't pay any attention to you. And you're like, Dad, pay attention to me. Like I'm doing this and I'm doing, and you're like the star athlete and you're doing this and you're doing that, and you're trying to do everything to prove to them that you're amazing. Well, one day you're going to grow up and you're still going to do those things just in a different way. And then you're going to meet a partner that's just like your father. And what's going to happen is we have what's called mirroring neurons. So I'll bring it back to science. We have mirroring neurons, right? And so let's say that your dad, when he wasn't paying attention to you, maybe he made excuses for his behavior. Maybe he said certain things to you. He kind of gaslit you, right? Something that he learned from his grandfather, back in the day. And so, like I said, generational curse. So he does those things and you grow up and your partner all of a sudden is like, well, I need to work. I need to do these things. You're less important. Well, now you're looking at your father in a romantic relationship. And all of a sudden to, kind of create that barrier, that like defense mechanism, guess what you do? You mirror them. Oh, you're going to do it? I'm going to do it back. Every subconscious block is an inner toddler just wanting to scream and kick and just, I want what I want, right? It's just always that way with every subconscious block. That's how you can tell. You're having an inner temper tantrum. You got a subconscious block right there and then. So, you kind of absorb later on in life, not just that helpless part of you, that sad part that's reaching for the attention, you absorb the abuser as well. And so in knowing that, we can take a step back, right? Because that person never knew. They learned from their grandparent. Their grandparent learned from their great-grandparent. It goes on and on. And so they never knew what they were doing. Those are subconscious, blockages. So if we look at that and we heal ourselves, guess what happens? There was a line, I'm going to use it because this is what I'm most familiar with. Jesus died on the cross. He said, forgive them, Father, for they did not know. We can forgive our parents because they did not know. And then all of a sudden we're seeing them with love. We're seeing them different, right?
Yeah. I just felt my whole body relax. I have to tell you, when you brought up the forgiveness, I had an emotional reaction and it just went, oh, yeah, because it is that. And I think that should be the call to action that we have to our listeners. We ask our listeners to embody our conversation. So who can you forgive? And, share that on your social media. Who do you want to forgive and see them for they knew no better? And tag us at the BTO podcast on, Instagram and Facebook, because it opens us up, right? It brings us back to self and soul. And that's a wonderful place.
To love.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for reminding me of that
yes.
conversation.
So anyway, final words before we finish that you want to depart on our listeners, our audience. You've given us a lot already, but
yeah,
and I'm sure we could just keep going and going. But
yeah, one thing I did just want to, for some reason, this is being put in my heart right now because I do want to share a personal experience with you guys really quick. Is that and I think Mark, this about me. I'm not sure if you know about this about me, Claudine, but when I was younger, and this is going to be in my book as well, I was raped and I was molested. So I was raped and molested from a young age. I get a lot of clients that have, sexual trauma, which can be really hard to reprogram. It can be really hard to forgive, but I can promise you this. If you don't, and I'm going to explain how I forgave, and you guys can take this with a grain of salt and, whatever, but hopefully this wisdom helps somebody out there that has gone through this, because I don't want to leave with, oh, just forgive everybody. Because that's kind of like, okay, like this person murdered somebody, this person, okay. So I'm going to bring it back to the spiritual a little bit and explain that, because I think that's what subconscious and science kind of misses out on, is that spiritual side and what I've learned from this. So with somebody who has dealt with somebody or something that's really traumatic, murder, rape, molestation, things like that, right? And we want to forgive. If we don't forgive, we hold on to resentment. That's why your body relaxed. When I said that forgive, your body relaxed, right? But the thing is, and what was revealed to me through prayer, and I'm just going to say that it's definitely spiritual, is that there's always going to be a spiritual warfare on the other side. Always. There's always the angel and there's always the demon or the devil, whatever you want to call it. So there's always that and there's always this. And I do believe, I really do, one, not just subconscious that our parents, because let's say that it's an inherited thing in our parents' lineage that like your mother was sexually assaulted, whatever. So their discernment goes off a little bit and maybe they'll put you in the position with a predator. Right. And we need to be aware of that so that we don't put ourselves, like we don't trust in that person that put us in a place with our predator. We need to learn to discern that, number one. So that's really important in healing. Number two is that what that person did was evil. It was evil. And one thing that I learned was that, I never truly, I'm going to be honest with you, I did not forgive the action. It was disgusting. I will never forgive that. My discernment, like that's just one thing that I will never do. But what I did learn was that whole thing on the cross when Jesus said, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know," is I let go of the attachment of the person and that thing. And I saw it. And this is just the way I saw it. And it helped me heal it, was that person was demonically possessed. That person was demon influenced, period, hands down. Now, I will never, ever put myself in a position with that person again. None of that. But I do know that helped me to back up and be like, okay, you know what? That was wrong. And I need to let go of this. Right. I just wanted to put that out there because I know that people, like, if I say something about forgiveness, they're going to be like, well, what about rape? What about molestation? What about all this? Not saying it's right. But it also helps us to look at the people that put us in those positions with those predators as well. Look at the discernment and not trust them anymore. Right. With discernment, with advice. So that's really important as well. That's the lesson that we will learn from that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you for sharing so vulnerably and authentically. So I can see how forgiveness and that discernment has worked for you. And like you said, that word, you've broken the attachment to the person and seeing it for who they were in that moment. Very important wisdom to share. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. It always is to have moments to connect with you.
Yes.
So thank you for being a guest here today and being in our lives. So I do hope people will learn their way on your Facebook because you share a lot there, a great wealth. I know I'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah. Yeah,
me too, even though I haven't booked it.
Yes.
What did you say, Mark?
I said, me too, even though I haven't booked it again. Yeah, I'll book my next.
Get on that.
Yes. We wish you a beautiful new year, and we thank you for being here today.
Yeah, you too. Happy New Year.
You got it. Yes.
Got it.
So thank you for listening to Break Through the Ordinary podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and our deep dive into the effective tools and wisdom to live an extraordinary life. If you'd like to support the podcast, leave a rating and please share it with others and post on social media. To catch the latest, you can follow us at the BTO Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And episodes drop every Monday. Thank you again. See you next time. Bye.